Good evening, everyone. Adequate notice of this meeting was provided by sending such notice to the Asbury Park Press, the Middletown Patch, the Middletown Township Public School District website, and the posting of such notice at the August T. Minor administrative offices and each elementary, middle, and secondary school website in the district. Roll call.
Mrs. Caminetti?
Here.
Mr. Donlin? Mr. Jarmo? Mr. Heffernan?
Here.
Mr. Little?
Here.
Mrs. Tobacco? Mrs. Wright?
Here.
Mr. Capone?
Here.
Mrs. Louise?
Here. Okay, we need to have a resolution to go into executive session for matters of personnel contracts.
So moved. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Good evening, everyone. Thank you for waiting. It is a workshop meeting, so we did have some personnel issues that we needed to discuss, and it took a little bit longer. Adequate notice of this meeting was provided by such notice to the Asbury Park Press, the Middletown Patch, the Middletown Township Public School District website, and the posting of such notice at the Augustine Minor Administrative Offices in each elementary, middle, and secondary school website in the district. Roll call.
Mrs. Caminiti. Mr. Donlin.
Here.
Mr. Gymo. Mr. Heffernan.
Here.
Mr. Little.
Here.
Mrs. Tobacco. Here. Mrs. Wright. Here. Mr. Capone.
Here.
Mrs. Stevens.
Here. Can we all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get started, I just want to let everybody know it's Share Coke Day. So we have some Coca-Cola, Dunkin' Donuts, coffee, and some cookies. If anybody wants to help yourself, please go ahead over and feel free. Okay, our first presentation is for student safety and data systems.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we are going to compare incidents that occurred in our district during the 2019-2020 school year and the 2020-2021 school year. It's important to recognize the fact that both of those school years were affected by the pandemic. Obviously, the 2020 school year and the 2021 school year was more profoundly impacted. Therefore, the numbers reflect that. The student safety data system is operated through the Department of Education, and every school district in the state of New Jersey is federally mandated to report out incidents that occur in that school district twice a year. And this is a combination. If you look at the left-hand column, it will highlight the different incidents that are reportable. We'll start with violence, which could be an assault, it can be a fight, it can be a threat, it can be kidnapping. There were 18 violence incidents during the 2019-2020 school year compared to 0 during the 2020-21 school year. Vandalism is the second incident. It can be damage to property. It can be trespassing. It can be arson. There's a variety of different incidents that fall underneath the vandalism category. In the 2019-2020 school year, there were 3 cases of vandalism. And during the 2020-21 school year, there were 0. Now, for substances, it could be abuse, it could be possession, it could be distribution. During the 2019-2020 school year, there were 31 cases of substance. And during the 2020-2021 school year, there were 8 cases. Weapons, similarly, it could be possession, use, distribution. There was 1 case of weapons in both the 2019-2020 school year and the 2020-2021 school year. HIB confirmed is just that, harassment, intimidation, and bullying cases that were confirmed. There were 60 of those cases in 2019-2020, and there were 19 cases in 2020-2021. Now, the other incident row is a little bit different. Those are incidents that occurred that resulted in removal of school programs, so either suspension or in-school suspension, but they don't include any of the 5 previous categories. So these other incidents can be willful disobedience, profanity toward a staff member, inappropriate use of social media. I encourage you, if you're interested to know what those other incidents are, each school has a handbook, a student handbook on the website. if you go to the code of conduct, it will highlight the other incidents that don't fall into those categories, but do result in a removal of school program. There were 232 cases in 2019, 2020, and there were 0 in 2020, 2021. HIB alleged, that's HIBs that were alleged, obviously, but not confirmed. There were 133 of those in 2019, 2020, and 58 in 2020, 2021. Now, when they total up the total student safety data system incidents, they do not include the HIB alleged or the other incidents. The only ones they actually report and count are the 5 previous categories of violence, vandalism, substance, weapons, and HIB. And those total incidents for the 2019-2020 school year were 113 compared to 28 during the 2020-2021 school year. Is that clear? Any questions from anyone on the board?
No.
All right, thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Oh, wait, just I have a question.
Go ahead.
Just want to know, why do you think we had so much more in 2019 versus the following year?
Well, for 2020, for 2021, most of the year was hybrid, so the students were not.
2021, right?
So-
And 2019 to 2020.
So there were more cases. It was more of a traditional school year because we went,
Just
right?
because,
So COVID-19 pandemic primarily started in March. So up until March, it was more of a traditional year. So those numbers are more in line with what a traditional school year would look like. The 2020-2021 school year, the students were basically hybrid for the
And they were
majority of the
part
year.
day, they weren't even in full day for most people.
So if you look, the numbers are very minimal in that 2020-2021 school year due to the fact that the school year was so abbreviated from the pandemic.
You had less students in each class in the hallways, more supervision, more, a better teacher-student ratio, really.
It was really dismissal every day. There were less kids in the high school. There's
They were
half the students.
separating a lot, 6 feet, just not a lot of interaction.
Ms. Kennedy, the first column of 2019-2020 is more in line with what a traditional school year would look like. We go back and look at
Not
previous
just
years.
partial.
I think,
Mr. Donovan?
You do mark for year over year, in other words, like we're 3 months in, you have data from the last 3 months of last year compared to what's happening with change.
Yes, we can look back. So it's reported every 6 months. So twice, we report to the state twice a year, but we do have records. If you want to look back and get questions, we can do
Yeah,
that.
just to measure that 6 months.
We can do that. Thank you. Anything else? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkpatrick. Superintendent Seventeen.
On Veterans Day, all of our schools held activities to honor, celebrate, and thank our servicemen and women for their service. I really encourage you to check the newsletter. There's an article about it with links to pictures and videos. Every school really had great celebrations. I mean, everything from raising a humongous flag with a fire truck to having our veterans come. It was just, there's a wall of heroes in 2 schools where students put up relatives that are servicemen, whether they're great grandparents or brothers, and it was really nice in every single school, something that they did. I really think going to school on Veterans Day made a difference that everyone actually celebrated and understood and learned more about our veterans and the service that they provided for our country. Also at High School North, there was Art Academy walkthrough. It was right before the break, and it was held during the lunch break. So administration and a lot of the students in the school went and saw the amazing artwork that our Arts Academy students had on display. These students are just so talented. And it was just really nice to see the other students in the school admiring and discussing the art, and really, it was a really nice, afternoon that we had. And the students and teachers are planning on having a couple more during the school year just to, display and celebrate their artwork of their students.
Alright. Under committee reports, legislative.
Met with Declan O'Scanlan, but I don't think we report on that already.
Yeah, we did that last week.
Yeah.
Okay. Technology, Mike?
I'm sorry, Mrs. Davies, Mr. Capone, did we want to talk about the legislative, so, under legislative committee? Talking about.
On the meeting, yeah, we're gonna do that under new business, yeah.
The senators will be reporting this.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Student services, we just had that tonight, Deb.
Yeah, we just have a short update because of the time period when we last met and then meeting tonight before the meeting. One thing we did discuss, and there has been planning going on, and I just want to plug this again for everybody, is there will be a presentation on inclusion on December 1st. That's being done in collaboration with MTF ODL and NJCIE. And hoping, and that is actually going to be virtual, so hoping that everybody, all parents can tune into this. This is really continuing the work that we have already undertaken in the district and trying to actually improve inclusion of our special ed students in general education. This particular presentation, I think, will also really be a good sort of reboot, if you will. If you remember, we talked about this in past meetings, but we actually had NJCIE come to the district in November of 2019. They gave a fantastic presentation of sort of what Middletown used to have in terms of inclusion, where we were at that point in time, but then also a really good discussion and training on what it could look like within our district. And we had really great response. A lot of parents have actually come to that meeting, and then from that really came a lot of the discussion that of goals that were actually then put into the strategic plan and really set us down a path sort of where we would like to be as a district. And actually now in having the 3 grants that we have at Leonardo, Harmony, and now Bayview, this is a lot of the ongoing work that will be highlighted that night as well. So I know there is an advertisement out there on it. So please, I think it's also on the district website, but just letting everybody know that that's really a great presentation that will be coming up on December 1st. Nothing sort of to report here in terms of firm dates, but we also had a brief discussion about possible dates for ESY for 2022. We are hoping that we'll actually have that in place to talk about it at the December meeting, so that way the parents can get that in their calendars for the summer way ahead of time. And the other thing that I think is on the agenda tonight, we also discussed at our meeting, is we will be entering into another contract with NJCIE to help us look at our 5th graders who then transition into middle school and 6th grade. And I think this has been a sort of trend that has been, I guess, in place for some time, where we have 5th graders who in elementary school are in the general education setting for science and social studies, but then they transfer to middle school, they're then in resource rooms and not in the general education classrooms. And so we're going to be entering into this contract with NJCIE to help us really look at why that might be, but then also to work with both the 5th grade teachers and the 6th grade teachers in terms of what we can actually improve to try and actually have our 6th grade students stay within their general education classrooms with the continuum of services. And then also helping to support those teachers so that we can actually make it a better opportunity and experience for them. And so that will be something, I guess, that's going to get started up within the next few months or so.
Definitely by January.
Okay. And that was it. That was all we discussed tonight.
Okay, thank you. Finance and facilities.
Did not meet, but we have a scheduled date for December 1st.
There's a few items on the agenda. It's a couple of transportation items, one for volunteers, one for bus evacuation drills, and the other item that's on the agenda for finance is the message plan funds.
Policy. No, you guys had a meeting.
We did have a meeting and we discussed the teacher testing policy, and it was determined that the administration will be doing a standard operating procedure instead of the board voting on that policy, and I believe that that's the work that should be coming soon. We also discussed the revision of schools policy and clarified a couple of things with that, including the fact that the religious holiday policy will be incorporated into this religion policy, so that's why it's being abolished. And then a couple of other changes, and those are pretty minor.
What were the differences in the religious policy?
The difference between what the changes are.
Yeah.
These came down, we had questions about this, and obviously it was tabled last time, we had questions about this, and this came down from the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education. So this is not necessarily something that we as a board or as a policy committee are recommending, it's just what came down. Unless Pat has any more to add.
Just basically that's back in late to that, Mr. Taggo was saying, it's in line with the recommendations from the Department of Education put out in January of 2020. There's no major additions in here. Basically, it speaks to students having the opportunity to participate in religion in school during non-curricular times, just like they can participate in any other activities during non-curricular times. That's really the main subject that interests us. And like she also spoke about, it does include religious holidays.
I think, and Jackie, we talked about this too, I think it's also good to clarify that this policy is not changing the practice of educators being able to talk about the origin of religion.
Right,
or history. I think there may be some confusion.
It was a little bit
about
confusing because it's some of the things that they struck, but basically, and we've spoken about this as well, and it was determined that this is more protective of the rights as our Constitution stipulates. So nothing is actually really changing, it might just be clarifying language.
And one thing though, we do have the religious holiday policy on to be abolished tonight. And we're just going to table that because we have to wait for the new policy.
Right, this needs to get adopted
And it's
first.
only a first reading, so next month we'll abolish the religious holidays and policy.
Correct.
Full, we have to solve that also.
Yes, religious holidays it's being combined into a policy.
All right, curriculum and instruction, Jack.
We haven't met since the last meeting, but I think there's a little bit on here about staff and offices and things like that. I don't have any other information. I don't think Ms. Peakus is here. Dr. Karen, you have anything you want to add?
Sure, I just said that as a curriculum department, we have the K-5 specialists and interventionists, as well as the secondary specialist interventionists for fall data. We looked at preliminary STAR results, preliminary results, and we created priority areas for all grades and subjects. And those we reviewed, they've already been shared with the elementary teachers. We just met the secondary on Friday, but we're going to review diagnostic solution on Wednesday. So we have, basically main ideas that we want to improve upon, along with target actions that we'll use to improve those areas and some of our fall actions. But overall, we're pretty pleased with our results, and it seems to come out pretty good across the grade bands. We had excellent discussions, and just looking forward to continued growth.
We also had our parent advisory council meeting. That's okay, which is under our parent information committee. That was on November 10th. And during that meeting, we did an overview of the grants process, our EFCA grant for FY22. And we had a presentation from the Long Branch Public Library. So they were able to provide the resources that are available for staff and students in our community, as well as the principals presented on all updates for their buildings for everything that's been going on with Title I and parent family engagement.
I was in the middle of that one, so we'll branch.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was actually an excellent, informative meeting, with all the information about the title funds, input from the parents, and the presentation with all the resources the library can provide, and it's really good.
I'm sorry, so just say it again. I didn't attend that, so I know what it was. Maybe just clarify what that meeting was for.
The meeting is it's actually a requirement for us on the ESEA grant, and it basically is to discuss funding for the title 1, 2, 3, 4. So, Ms. Burt went and, discussed the whole application process and what we're using the funds for and why. And it was really informative. It was very good.
And I think it was PIC reps, administration,
It was pick reps, and then there was additional representations from the Title I schools, I think some other schools too. It was a much larger group, and it was great. There was comparative beginning and end, and questions in the middle. It was a really good meeting. I enjoyed it, and I learned, and I live it every day, so it was very good.
The purpose is just to kind of share the information that, we have a lot of parents on our committee, so they just really take the information that, is presented and kind of share it out more to the community, so we can create more of an awareness of what we're all about, and it's required under ESE and the Title I and Title III.
No, I know that, I just want to make sure the public did, because I apologize.
All right, student activities, co-curricular. Your turn.
Well, we did meet, we met tonight, guys, prior to our meeting. Went over for sports and season's over, but everything went well. A lot of children got to play. Yes. Winter sports are starting. They're looking into, first of all, they said no limitations on spectators during home games. They're looking into clarification about masks at the hockey and bowling games, because we have to see they're not in our buildings, and we need to find out. Our Thanksgiving Day game will be at High School New York this year. We have some interesting news. As far as the Strong Conference tournament, basketball and wrestling, this year we're going to be hosting quarterfinals at High School South, which is a big deal, especially with the wrestling and basketball. First of all, parents are going to be able to take place as far as working concession stands, so it's a little bit of income for those teams. The ticket sales will be sold by the conference. They do that all the time. They'll sell ticket sales. They'll get those proceeds. But everybody's welcome to go. It's nice. It's nice to be asked to host that. So it's a nice thing for our district. Then we also talked about volleyball and teams versus volleyball. This is something that the board needs to discuss a little bit. Volleyball has been fundraising themselves to raise the funds to have these the varsity volleyball that we have. Well, next year will be the 5th year for volleyball, raising the funds. And that's what I'm told. I see you thinking.
Is it 5 years? I don't think so.
No, it was 2 years, according to Richard, it was 2 years of intramural, and then 2 years of, this is the 2nd year for varsity.
But altogether, you said it's 4 years.
Yeah,
That's
2 years for
the
intramural, 2 years varsity, next year will be the 5th.
So that's what she's saying.
Isn't that what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So they're asking if they felt that we could, if maybe instead of them raising it, or they would like the school district to pick up 2/3 of it, and they will pick up 1/3 of it. They want to start working more on a JV team. Because like normally, if you don't have a JV team, it's very hard to have a very strong varsity team. We need to discuss it as a board. We don't have to make a decision tonight, but we need to see where we're going to go with this.
It would just be JV for girls at this point. That's where all the interest is. They have a lot of students for the varsity team.
Very good participation.
Oh, we always, yes, but volleyball has been a.
It sounds like this would be a part of a budget discussion.
Well, that's why we need to get it on the table, because Amy's planning the budget, so she's gonna have to see.
We're all planning the budget. Yeah, everybody's.
Now, Amy, you're doing it all.
They all are.
Okay, well, and that was our report right now.
Great. We had a long personnel discussion. We're sorry again that the meeting was delayed, but this is our workshop to discuss that. A lot of issues came up, so we addressed that. Negotiations, Mr. Huckabee.
We met last Thursday, and we discussed labor contracts that expiring this June 30th, 2022. We talked about the MTPS contract and the teachers role number 11 maintenance still delivered with all of the county professionals. I reviewed recent negotiation settlement information. The New Jersey Sports Association discussed the timeline for negotiations. And we planned first MTA meeting scheduled for November 8th. This Thursday.
Did we schedule a shared services?
Yeah, we don't have, we didn't have shared services. Oh, no, we did have shared services.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, so an update on the Safe Routes to School Grant Program, Hubbard Avenue Shadow Lake Dam Bridge Project. The Township and Committee of Monmouth recently worked out an agreement for the engineer consultant who's working on the Safe Routes project for the township and also assesses the bridge and dam project on Hubbard for the county. The design concept for the project is expected tentatively in January. And we also spoke about the epidemiologist, which we did not move forward with at this moment. And a couple other things, but some confidentiality stuff that has to be fighting.
Was there anything discussed on that bus rapid? So that's for the Middletown South. Well, I think it's for
Four blocks. So I think we did discuss a lot about routes. I think we're meeting as a board first to see if we could discuss more.
Does anybody have any questions on the agenda for next week? With that. Under old business, I have a few things. We have reached out to our lobbyist about getting us a meeting with Governor Murphy to explain our situations and positions that we're not being able to fill, and seeing where it is that we can maybe work these things out, or if anything's gonna change, is there gonna be any guidelines that change? We're waiting to hear back from our lobbyist. She hasn't reached out. I'm sure it's gonna take a little bit of time for her to try to work that out, but we felt that it might be the best to try to meet right at the top instead of going through lower people, if it's possible. It might not be. But anything that we could do to explain to him the situations that Middletown is in, and any assistance that we can do to try to give some relief to some of those issues. So once we come up with a meeting, I'm sure as a board, we're gonna discuss the topics that we want to discuss with him, so that everybody has a say in what they want us to cover. And I'm sure from administration, we're gonna hear from them, you know, their difficulties in filling positions and situations. Like we're having a hard time getting substitutes. We're having a hard time getting teachers. Positions not being filled. We want to see, you know, if there's any changes. We don't know exactly why. We have some inklings to why we're not filling those positions, but any assistance that the state could give us, the Department of Education, on you know, trying to fill these positions. I'm sure every district is in the same position as us, from what I'm hearing, talking to other school boards across the country, you know, and really, I guess, trying to find out from him, is there going to be any changes coming down the pipe that might be able to help us? And finances also, definitely finances.
Wall Street Journal about substitutes and, you know, basically a lot of schools just lowering of it.
Yeah.
So the question is, how low do you want to go?
Exactly.
How much more money do you want to pay, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions. I mean, and finance is gonna be a big thing. I mean, we've got hit hard with that too, and
There's more cuts on the agenda.
And so I just wanted to ask, like, what is the thought process of who would be in attendance at that meeting?
well, we're trying to get administration and Frank and myself there. Because I think administration really needs to, you know, they deal with these issues every day. And any advice, and, you know, any advice they can offer him, and any advice that he can offer us, you know, would be a win-win. And the second thing is, No, it's actually new business, so, anybody else have old business? Old business. Under new business, I did want, I know we discussed it briefly about advisory periods, but there are a lot of parents that have concerns about our advisory periods and the kids not being able to go and take tests during those periods or get extra help. I just wanted to reiterate to the public that we are working on that, so that we can back up for our students to be able to use those periods as they were meant to be. Because, you know, a lot of parents have expressed concerns that, you know, maybe their kids were out quarantined, or maybe their kids are just slacking behind and they need that extra help and they haven't been able to get it. So, just so that everybody's aware, we are looking into that. Any other new business?
Yes, absolutely, it is, it needs. I'd like to put forth a motion to the board to go out for a completely thorough investigation report on our mold issue that we had back in August. I think there's no accountability at this point. I think that we spent $750 million. I think we really need to know what was done properly or not properly to cause this. This way it does not happen again in the future.
Second.
I know
that we can take action.
But you could take a strong hold consensus. That's what it wants to do.
So we think in consensus, they still have to vote next week.
Yeah, I mean, you could vote. I mean, technically, you don't need to vote to do an investigation, but if that's the way the board wants to go, you could, might as well take a strong hold.
You give a direction.
Yeah.
It's okay to consensus or discussion.
Well, just like to know what we can get out of that besides what our consultants were. How much you talking? How much money?
I mean, I think we have to put a threshold there of, you know, $10,000-$15,000 report that will come back to us within 30 days. No, but you know what, John? It cost almost $1 million, and we have no clue how to prevent this in the future.
Are you talking like prevention?
Yeah.
Investigation?
We need to know what's in place, why it happened, and how to prevent this in the future.
And our consultant can do that.
No,
Well, I want to suggest to the board that through facilities and finance, our consultant actually does have recommendations
Right,
for
that's what
the
I thought.
district and can discuss more in detail of the conditions that contributed to the issue. So my recommendation would be to have the consultant speak to the committee before we would have additional investigation.
so I spoke to consultant action, and I wasn't thrilled, so that's why I'm looking for another outside third party.
Another, you don't let somebody else.
Their idea, their opinion, doing a thorough and complete investigation.
Who would we look to?
I would actually maybe ask Bruce if there's somebody else that you know, where
I have to
two names that can come in front of the board.
Are you thinking, like a professional, like a facilities type professional?
I think it'd be a professional slash attorney counsel.
Maybe I'll just look into it and I'll report back.
Frank, did you speak to the consultant by yourself? To follow
No,
up in terms of
I
what
spoke to him with
recommendations
the board first. Then we spoke as a whole in executive session.
Okay, so, because I'm remembering some recommendations at the time, right, that he was talking about, and I think that's obviously why we have now HVAC systems. Their HVAC systems, but are there further recommendations that we have not heard from the consultant?
He's in the process of writing them up. He had, without going into a lot of detail, he had a medical death in his family, and there's been a bit of a delay, but he has spoken to me about providing, you know, written recommendations and reviewing this in more detail with the facilities.
I mean, so I think we should actually go through that process first before we actually engage and spend more money on that and set up a report.
Well, we don't really know how to prevent this in the future. That's what I would like to know, how to prevent this and what actually took place and transpired. We did speak to him. I believe everybody was there when I mentioned the comment about what I thought it was, and he did not deny it, nor did he say I was wrong. So that's why I think that we need some third party to be involved at this point to find out.
But if we don't have his full final report, which is going to include recommendations, which sounds like
He was writing up.
We have a
for us to
report
be-
from it.
We have the results of the testing
Yeah,
and
results.
so forth, but
Yeah.
he's going to additionally write recommendations for maintaining buildings.
You know when that, about that for us?
He's, it should be soon. I mean, I get a more definitive date on it, but he was just in the district last week to finish up some work at the Navy State Library, and I can speak more about it.
Frank, would you be willing to read that report first?
As long as it's in a timely fashion.
Makes sense. I mean, you should have it.
Well, I can tell them that we're having our next meeting December 1st, and we can have something then, or maybe
The same for a committee.
our committee.
Maybe we can have it this next week if that's possible. Have it come back into a voting session next Monday.
Sure.
So I guess the committee will also make sure that we're on the same page in terms of what they're.
I'm not concerned about the committee, I want the report this way.
You know what I mean? Is we
don't
make sure
speak
that,
about this.
the report could be him just having like 2 lines saying, right, don't read examples. So you guys are speak to him, sort of make sure we're on the same page, so we don't waste time.
Let Amy speak to him, let's get the report, and then let us
Amy.
all
He has
speak about it.
suggestions, I think.
Okay, so in other words, so we have a quality report.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm like having him come talk and answer some questions.
And then we'll see if it's not, we don't like that, or other, something in there, we can figure out.
Do you
how to work it
think
out.
he can come and answer some questions?
Well, my suggestion was to invite him to the next facilities and finance meeting.
So maybe at least come next week to our board meeting.
I mean, I can ask him.
And I just want to go for the record, our HVAC systems, we've been talking about replacing them since maybe March. You know, looking to get them into the budget. He didn't have anything to do with recommendation of that. That's been something that's been talking about. He's trying to figure out how we're gonna financially be able to do that.
Give it a week, let's see if he can come out with a report first, next Monday, and then we can speak about it. See, we go from there.
All right, any other new
I'll
business?
report back.
All right, opportunity for public comment. Please remember to keep your comments close to 3 minutes. I do allow a little bit over, but I told them to go too far over.
Yes. I just have a couple things to clarify. I appreciate the conversation about the religion policies because that was a big part of what I had questions about, so I appreciate the clarification. As it read, to me, it was not protective, but listening to everyone say that it was protective and rereading it, it sounds better. My question is, if it is protective, why are we still taking out those last paragraphs that says the board is in understanding of all this? I don't understand if we're saying that this is okay, and we're saying that we're leaving it in, our students and our staff have First Amendment rights and everything's status quo, for lack of a better word, why are we still taking out those last paragraphs? I'm just not quite understanding taking out, that we're all in agreement, and it's basically reiterating everything that is being said. Why can't the board acknowledge that? Why is that language have to be taken out? We're not really changing anything. So that's my, I don't know if you can clarify that or speak about that or not, but that's my issue with taking out those last paragraphs, is that I think it takes a lot of the protective rights for the students and the staff by taking those last paragraphs out. And in reading the legislation that goes along with this, I see everything in shortened form from the legislations into the policy. So I see that, and I see how the legislation read much more protective than the policy did. So it was just like a translation that I wasn't seeing, but I understand, I appreciate the explanation, but I do believe that taking those last paragraphs out leaves a lot of holes and for interpretation in the future. My other question, in reading the policies that are up for next week was the health and physical education policy. I understand that this is an overview of, or seems to be an overview of the big picture of what each category would actually be discussed during phys ed and health education. And I find it very disturbing on a lot of levels that our children and our teachers are expected to speak about some of this stuff. The relative to consent for physical contact and sexual activity, age-appropriate instruction relative to consent for physical contact and sexual activity. I don't even know how that would represent the classroom, or what that would look like, or what curriculum falls under that category. And if we're saying that are, again, tying both the religion and this curriculum together, if we're saying that the history of disabled and LGBT persons is allowed in discussion of physical and health education, and specifically African Americans and their contributions to the United States, is religion tied into that also? How religion has created and backed up the United States and the history of that, and how that has affected the United States. So I'm not sure why these categories and these individuals are being pointed out and not including everyone. We spoke about many times about including everyone, and I just feel like some of this language is not including everyone and has a possibility of making students feel not okay about who they are and what they believe, because they're being taught specifically about another group of individuals. So that's one of my concerns of that. And with the it's just disturbing. When I was in school, phys ed and health was taking care of yourself and exercising and driver's ed. Do they teach driver's ed anymore? Yes. That's how I did it. And that was that was the highlight of your health career. And I know this is coming down from the state, but I think that as members of the community, we need to be more aware of what's being taught in our classrooms, or what will be taught, or what will be approved, and how does the general population of parents find out about this? I know for a fact that half of the people that I even know have no idea that this is even on the radar of what could be taught to our children in the classroom, and how there's no curriculum that goes out in the school year. I haven't received anything from my sixth grader saying that this is what's going to be taught in sixth grade health throughout the year. I've gotten general, hygiene, health. I've gotten the general things, but I've gotten no curriculum based on that. So I'm just curious about how the general community is finding out about these things.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes. Add just to you real quick, in regard to this policy, that is not a mandatory policy to making a change. We're just recommending that, correct?
It's a recommendation. If we have an existing policy in place.
So our existing recommendation is one to keep. I know we spoke about this, but all of the strikings that they made here are significant, obviously. And the other thing is that the health and physical fitness, that is a mandatory policy.
Correct.
That we need to adopt. And all of these things in here also fall under opt-out, parent like to opt out during health class.
I don't want to answer that question because I don't have the exact answer, but I know that we do opt out our health curriculum at high school level, so I'm assuming.
I was told that every age level had an opt-out in health.
So I'm making this.
She is a curriculum, right? Kim's not here tonight. He's not here, so
I think you're asking what we went over in curriculum and what we improved in curriculum, that the policy is consistent.
Let's get a clear answer.
Yeah.
Because I thought that I thought this policy also spoke to that this can be incorporated throughout the entire curriculum.
Well, some of the items on, I believe, explain to us that some of it has to be. The degree in which you do it depends on the district, but the state requires that some of these topics, better part to speak about it, have to be put through other areas of curriculum. So in other words, there was some social study, I call it social studies, curriculum discussed, right? And we're talking about how some of the, I think the one parent, which is like I just mentioned about, I think African-American contributions, that was something that the state requires that you discuss in part in various other areas. I wasn't aware of the policy, obviously, but I think we should, Kim could speak to us when she's back. These are items discussed in the group curriculum.
Yeah, no, I think just some clarification, when we discussed this in policy, there was concern, I thought that this could be incorporated really anywhere, so how could it be an opt-out?
Right, well, that's why something that helped is what that is, that piece, something that you would think that.
Right, and the state didn't really give us resources yet. Yeah, right, or.
In some areas, yes, but the actual health and phys ed policy, I think our health and phys ed has been redone, right, I mean, that's pretty specific, there's a curriculum for that, but then there are other areas that you're supposed to leave in and appropriate.
That's where that's where
social studies.
The House MPP has 60 statutes that are required by the state.
But they are able to be incorporated into any subject matter by any teacher, correct?
No, we should have.
Sure.
Yeah, we should have to go back, because I think it's more of the contributions from various groups and not necessarily health topics. We do it a lot, right?
I think pretty much everything, the LGBTQ
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's able to be incorporated everywhere, and then with the African American and diversity and inclusion, it's separate.
And basically, the state has come out with the law, but they haven't yet developed the standards to go along with it. So we are, we're not going to be able to change our curriculum until the standards are developed. Base your curriculum on those standards. But our staff has been trained to bring it into the lesson appropriately to each level.
The contributions.
Or
In other words,
no,
we're talking about,
there's a
like-
few different things. I know like the LGBTQ is in there.
Right,
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, that's like I said in the speakers gets back, but I thought, and I'm hoping that's the same.
Yeah.
Is that we were saying that contributions from individuals, not
that's-
necessarily discussions on, I think one of the topics is, appropriate interactions, sort of more on a health topic. Is that what you're asking, Jackie? Like, in other words, more of the, I guess, the sexual nature of things versus, a group of individuals.
No, it would be
I think it's the
detailed.
contribution part of it, the only part I remember that Kim and.
Or an
Mr. House
understanding
mentioned.
of it.
Right, but the policy that we need to adopt by the state, unless we're reading it wrong, we talked about it, we just spoke about it, is saying that those things can be incorporated into any class. So Frank was saying parents can just opt out for health, they don't ever have to learn about, the different sexual things that are in this
Right.
curriculum. But that's actually not necessarily true, because it could be incorporated into any class. And it's
By
very
the policy.
clear right now, under this policy.
Oh, the way the policy is different than what we did in the curriculum.
Yes. So we might not put it into curriculum, but it also kind of leaves it open for teachers to speak on it, use their own resources.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
it's very
definitely
gray area.
consistent on that stuff.
It's very gray area, and as Mary Ellen said, Mr. Booker said, nothing came down from the state yet with a plan or with a.
But we are creating a committee, well, first of all, our teachers have to train our teachers, and we are developing a committee for like every grade level with resources that would be appropriate for teacher, to teach from. Not a curriculum, because we're not ready to rewrite the curriculum, but to have resources for them to pick for a question or on that topic.
Right, so we'd be able to get a list of the resources that are
We're just developing those, Mr. Chairman's working on developing those committees, you will when it's done. It's just in the development stage.
In the meantime, we have to vote on these policies that we don't have.
Well, no, they're laws, I mean, this is mandatory, it's not anything that we're deciding.
Mandatory, but changes the
required by law.
Not to this policy.
You can still add wording to this policy, that's correct. Yeah, as long as it still applies to the law, that's.
But we
Wording.
can't eliminate the policy.
Can't
We
look at it,
eliminate
and try and alter or change the wording.
It's like meeting restrictions.
I don't think there's right, same restriction versus there's more words in this. Speaking of right now.
Is there a mandatory date has to be adopted by the policy?
But I have to go back and check the policy, but I don't think it was really good. If it's not done by the state.
Meeting about it. And our speaking to the right.
So should we table it for next week? She doesn't want to have a meeting.
Should we, I mean, we haven't had a curriculum committee, we want to talk about it there, or a policy, or.
We can do both actually, but that's why we should probably table it for 1 more month. Let's speak in curriculum, let's speak in policy, let's come up with something that makes sense.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense that we're gonna vote on something that we don't have all the specifics to. So, yeah, I'm okay with the table.
I have one more question about this policy. Who says that we can add words to them? We should make it more restrictive. Yeah,
You might not be able to make it work, it depends what changes you want to make. You really can't make substantive changes to it.
Okay, then we should table
Consensus over here for the table on it, so we get more info. Okay, I am, all right. Take it off. All right. Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, fear of safety. I'd like the board to consider when you have presentations, particularly with outside vendors or experts. In the past, you used to let the public ask questions while those people were still in attendance. That doesn't seem to happen now, like they present, a lot of times they go away. And then the whole meeting goes before the public can comment. And then sometimes those experts are gone. So just in consideration for the board to let the discussion happen while those people are still in the attendance.
Just to clarify, last week was a board committee of the whole. Presentation was there for the board so that we could have discussions about those funds. Normally, we have presentations at our workshop meetings and we let the public jump in on the conversation, but we requested that meeting specifically so that the board could discuss those funds. And we found out that night that the presentation was going to happen, but that was really a committee of the whole meeting. We can't do it in private, we have to do it in public. So the event to the public is, when we're having that meeting, you get to see that presentation. But that committee of the whole was strictly for the board discussion.
Yeah, I'm talking in general, even when we had Zoom, they'd get off the call, and then by the time the public can ask a question, they're already off the call.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard a lot of comments about last week, but I mentioned to Mary Ellen, I wanted to clarify that. We needed to have a committee of the whole so that we could actually discuss things, and I thought our meeting was good. We can't do that in closed session, so it's transparent that we do it outside. But that meeting was strictly a committee of the whole for the board. It wasn't a public question time. Tonight would have been the night if you saw the presentation, come to the mic and ask your questions, because we didn't vote on it. It's just our presentation.
I haven't finished watching the last presentation.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I don't know if things have changed, but when my kids were, particularly in elementary school, even now middle school, I would get a form every year on the health topics. Could sign off, and even in elementary school, if we wanted to, we could preview the video and see what was going to be presented. I never excluded my kids, but I always felt like I knew what was coming up. And even this year, I've got a preview of the curriculum in social studies as well. So, I do feel like we are getting information.
Thank you.
What else?
Erica Lucchese, daughters at Natswam. My question on the last meeting was just about the professional development that they were doing, kind of side-by-side coaching with the teachers. I was curious, and we talked about how it was going to be in the behavioral disabilities class. Was that just where they were starting? And then they were going to go do it in other areas in the district, or was it just for that class?
Shall we do it on that chance?
There was no firm really discussion or decision on which classroom they were going to start in. That was actually when they talked about it last week. That was just a discussion that I had with them on phone earlier that day about like different needs that we have. So it's just something that we mentioned as a possibility, but there hasn't been any decision about which classes they would go in. I mean, hopefully with in January and June, they should really be able to hit a lot of our classes and different teachers and different programs, but nothing kind of mapped out yet.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, thank you. Gary Tulp, 601 Buchanan Boulevard, Plaza. I know it's a little unorthodox sometimes to get a response at these meetings, and I appreciate there is a process, but I recognize that there's been some back and forth, which is certainly more efficient, and greatly appreciate if anybody would like to respond. But I want to just basically just raise a concern that I know I speak for a lot of parents in the district about the seemingly inevitable order you're going to be getting from the state, actually about a mandate vaccine for all these school children. I've spoken a little bit over email with Superintendent Walker, and I appreciate your initial response. I know I've asked for elaboration. I can be a bit long-winded at times, but I appreciate whatever you get back to me with. But I thought it might be helpful to a lot of parents to bring it up at a meeting like this. And my concern is not, again, I feel like I've said this before, and I hate to reiterate, but I don't ask that anybody do anything that's subordinate, revolutionary, anything that puts your roles, your jobs in jeopardy. The thing is, I think I know where a lot of members of the board stand, and I don't pretend to know all the separation of powers issues of what the administration does, what the board does. I'm educating myself on that every day. But what I don't have a handle on is what our administration, our district, has in mind in terms of preparations or whether it's internally or with maybe other districts, to at least question the wisdom of something like that. At least question it, perhaps challenge it, perhaps advise the state that this might be a wrong-headed idea, that there's a lot of concerns that need to be taken into account. I heard tonight for the first time, which I thought was interesting, that there's a movement to potentially get a meeting with the governor or higher ups. I think that's wonderful. I would hope the agenda items include what I think a lot of us think are the most consequential, significant issues any of us never thought we'd ever have to deal with our kids at school, on top of whether there are funding questions and hiring personnel issues. I hope that gets raised. So I certainly hope that's on the agenda if you get that meeting. Good luck to you trying to get it. But anyway, my main concern is that we would like to know, parents would like to know at the very least, are we a district that's preparing to question this, to work with other districts to say, hold on, let's think about this, to advise the state and all of our peers that you deal with day to day at other levels. This is something that frankly doesn't make any sense to me, but there's a lot of issues to be dealt with. Or are we a district that is simply just waiting to implement what comes down? What a lot of us parents have seen, and I think Middletown's done a good job compared to a lot of other districts, but statewide, there seems to be a very strong feeling of, well, it's mandated, so it's coming down and we're going to implement it. I think it's clear to us now that as long as His Majesty and the others in the state think that there are tens of thousands or at least thousands of public school administrators and employees just waiting to implement what comes down, then they have no reason to think twice. They have no reason to take a step back that maybe this isn't going to fly. So I would just encourage Middletown as a district, which I think is very admirable in a lot of ways, large, diverse, educated district, to think about your role as more than just implementing what comes down. It's something that keeps all of us parents up nightly. My family, people are in tears sometimes we worry about where we head. And I just hope, while thinking about that, taking steps to do more than just wait for it. So,
Thank you. And no one else with the mic? I make a motion to go back into closed session for matters of contract and personnel.
Second,
You have to say how long. No action.
Oh, no, yeah, no action will be taken. It's a continuation of our personnel. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you, everyone.